Hello and welcome to what I call a new video. And today we're going to be talking about a single theory that has been going around recently, which is the theory that all of the dialogue options are actually influenced by Kris.
Which is like a theory I never get. He's like, no?
But that of course relies on a few certain assumptions, including, does Kris know Sans? So Sans goes on this whole spiel about how he's just arrived in the town and no one really knows them except last night he befriended your mama, so he must have been here since at least last night. So technically Kris could have seen Sans around. I presume this is not literally the second day of Sans' being there because Sans has a whole ass store there. So there must have been a time where Kris could have seen Sans, maybe. But then again, the dialogue option is not, hey, I saw you around yesterday, hi again. The dialogue option is, it's good to see you again. As if it's like a formal greeting, hey, I know you. It's written with the intent of an Undertale player reading this, you know? That is clearly, obviously, 100% definitely, no goddamn question, the intent. But maybe the intent can also mean something else, and that is this Kris theory of them choosing the dialogue options, which, yeah, that doesn't make any fucking sense yet. But technically, they could know Sans, and then say it in a really weird way, because, you know, if Kris is the one choosing the dialogue options, then, you know? I mean, you can chop that one up to Kris, like, just being weird, which they objectively are. They are so weird. But then you gotta ask yourself the question of, like, why Undyne? So in chapter 1 Undyne dialogue, there's just the option to ask about your teacher, which there is no correlation between your teacher and Undyne in there yet, at all. Now, wait a minute. Did Kris play Undertale? There is quite literally absolutely no reason why Undyne and Alphys should be in any sort of way related, because they have literally never interacted at all, in any sort of way. That dialogue is also clearly written with the intent of that being an Undertale player, you know, asking about the thing they saw in Undertale and not being in Deltarune. But if we ignore that part too, and say that this is actually Kris's whole thing, then we must think to ourselves, is Kris an Undertale fan? Because there's this other theory that Asriel made Undertale on his computer because of the scrapped hyper-dev design. Basically, Asriel has the god of hyper-dev on his PC, and so some people have the theory that the entirety of Undertale is on his PC. Which, I don't like that theory because it sucks ass in all ways. This is not a joke. Let me talk to you. Imagine making a game, and this game being so popular and beloved by anyone that it blows up all over the internet. And then you make a new game, and you get a bunch of these same characters in there, and then you decide that your first game was actually entirely made by a single character in the new game, thereby making every single fucking part of that first game not matter even more, because it's literally a game within a game within a game, which sucks ass. This is not how you treat legacy content, basically. This also would mean that Asriel wrote a fucking fan fiction about all of the people in the goddamn town, including people that weren't in the goddamn town yet. Because again, this Undertale that would be on his PC would be written by a toddler Asriel, which is obviously bad, so definitely he couldn't have known Sans because Sans literally just moved in and has never seen Kris before. If we of course go under the assumption that Sans isn't lying here and maybe Sans is actually working with the Knight and with the whole Kris Colosseum, but then you gotta, you know, question yourself again, why would Kris expose the entire operation if that was the case? If we go under the assumption that Kris is the one choosing the dialogue options, we have to make a lot of new assumptions to make any of them work. For example, we can go under the assumption that Kris gets like a prompt and then gets to, elaborate on that prompt. For example, during the Sans interactions, I would like say hi or say a familiar hi, and then you would say like, hi Sans, and hi, I've seen you around sometimes. But Kris instead says, hi Sans, and it's nice to meet you, old friend. I've never seen you before in my entire life, but sure. Why would Kris say that? Why? They've never talked before. Why would Sans lie about that? There's no reason for him to. Unless, of course, we go under the assumption that Sans is working with the knight, which doesn't make sense. Again, because he was too busy fucking Kris's mom to actually help out. Yeet. Again, Sans is like one of the few people that we know is not the knight, because Sans was busy fucking your mom the entire time to be the knight, because the knight was busy doing absolutely nothing in chapter 4. Why was the knight doing nothing in chapter 4? What was the knight doing? The knight did absolutely nothing for the entirety of chapter 4 until they made a titan, which was beaten immediately. What's the point? To show how futile it is to fight, because the roaring could happen at literally any moment? Probably. I don't know why the roaring hasn't happened yet. Clearly the knight doesn't want to do the roaring, but the hamana. But no matter what it is, I doubt you are working with him. So this dialogue theory makes absolutely no goddamn sense. Okay, so the dialogue theory can work if a toddler Asriel made the entirety of Undertale inside of his PC, Kris played it, and therefore is now shipping Undyne with teacher Alphys. Also, Asriel had like a weird hate boner for Alphys, because Alphys in Undertale is default for everything. She's the reason anything happens, except like the first issue, that was Chara. And, considering Asriel is in the game and their sibling is Chara in the game and their sibling outside of the game is Kris, does Asriel hate Kris? I don't like to think about that fun fact. But if the dialogue theory of Kris choosing the type of dialogue we, say, isn't true, then it would make a whole lot more sense, especially considering the following. Ralsei and Noelle. The entirety of the weird route, there are many dialogue choices, which are just like, Kris wouldn't say that. Though there is also the, one of the two dialogues that are actually that sound like Kris, But the rest of that scene is entirely the player. Very obviously the player. Just like with Sans, very obviously the player. Just like with Undyne, very obviously the player. And with Noelle, very obviously the player, except this one dialogue choice, which is where this theory comes from. And then we go to Ralsei. And I'm gonna be honest, every second dialogue choice is literally just us telling him to kill himself. Like, the dialogue choices for Ralsei are, hey, you're my best friend, fluffy boy, I love you, and kill yourself! Like, we can get so diabolical that our answers are hush-hushed by Kris. Why would Kris hush-hush their own answer? Like, if Kris is the one given the commands, why would they? What? If they get a prompt, then sure, they can, prompt engineer it a little bit so that it isn't that mean and that they can actually say it. But giving me the option and then going fucking bitch. It's why? Why even give me the option in the first place? If you're the one choosing the dialogue, why give me the option to be mean if you don't want to be mean? Kris, what are you on about? Anyways, this theory is stupid. So if it's not this, what can it be? It's one of three options. The player, Kris, or both. See, I've just gone into extensive description of how this doesn't make any goddamn sense and will be therefore discarded. Go fuck yourself. However, the other two can both work. See, the please stop dialogue where this entire theory is based on, it can be interpreted as being Kris, which would mean that it's both. However, it can also be interpreted as a regretful player. Because you see, the way the dialogue is written in Deltarune, the way the choices are written in Deltarune, do not represent every single player. Because you see, even though 99% of the Deltarune community has played Undertale, has seen Undertale, has experienced Undertale in some sort of way, and would therefore get the Sans dialogue references and get the Undyne dialogue references with their counterparts inside of Undertale. Players that have not played Undertale and not seen Undertale at all ever in their entire lives do not get this, and are therefore not in the role of the player that is in the game. So the option of a player being a regretful, weird root player and then, discarding the root immediately because like, oh, I didn't mean for this to happen, this is above my pay grade, I must leave now, is very much a thing the player can be. And therefore, it can be both of these. However, what I personally think is that the choices aren't diegetic. At least the way they're laid out isn't diegetic. It's just choices you can make. That's it. Yeah, sometimes the most boring answer is the most likely one, because let me tell you something, brother, I'm racist. No, let me tell you something, brother, the man I'm referencing is racist. No, well, let me tell you something, brother. Sometimes it's just that easy. My fit goes absolutely goddamn hard. Cue the clown.